We will be interviewing Holly Greer this afternoon, and Holly, again, is one of the founding mothers, the term that we're using to describe the women who were so influential in getting a women's center in Marquette. Holly will describe some of the earliest days as she was director, almost from the get-go. Holly?
Thanks, Jane, but I think in my case you should say founding grandmothers. It's been a long time. Um, we came, Bill and I and our 4 children, our dog and our cat, came to Marquette in 1965, I think. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, I said, don't you think we should get some reservations because we can't get into our house yet? And Bill said, oh, no, not in Marquette. There'll be plenty of vacancies. Well, we went all over the place, couldn't find a vacancy. See, all 6 of us and the dog and the cat ended up in one room for the night. So that was our introduction to Marquette. But Bill was the rector of St. Paul's Episcopal Church. And we had come from Grand Rapids, where he had been for almost 10 years, or we had been for almost 10 years. And I had been busy raising children. I had 4 children within 6 years, and that was a lot of kids. But I can remember feeling when I was in Marquette, really frustrated. I loved my kids. I just adored them. But I kept thinking, is this all there is? Is this really all there is? I'm going to end up just talking baby talk for the rest of my life. I couldn't. I had graduated from Smith College in 1953, and Bill and I were married in 1955. I had worked for a couple of years for the Episcopal Church, and then when Billy was born in New York City in 1956, and after that we moved to Grand Rapids. I'd taken some courses in Grand Rapids. I wasn't sure what I wanted. I had been a history major, but there wasn't a great call for history majors. So I thought maybe I should get into library science. So I started taking courses in poetry and library science. And then we decided, Bill had a call to come to Marquette. George Hill was a good friend of ours. And George just lived up here. He had been in Grand Rapids, and he lived up here. Anyway, so we came to see Marquette. And I remember that first time, it was January. It was cold, but it was beautiful. And we walked out on the breakwater, and there were the tremendous northern lights. And it was just, they were just in Technicolor. They're just gorgeous. And George says, not a bad view for a small town, is it? Anyway, we ended up coming here and living on College Avenue. And as I say, I had this feeling about there must be more to life than that. So I started taking some courses. Ended up getting a master's degree in history. And then I was a graduate assistant in the history department, but I did not teach history. I was teaching I was teaching out of the English department, and it was kind of a overview kind of course. Can't remember the name of it. But that was fun, but I knew I had no future at the university unless I had a PhD. And the closest I could get PhD would have been either Lansing or Ann Arbor. And I had all these little kids. I couldn't very well just leave them. So I did not do that. But so I was teaching I was teaching after I finished my graduate assistantship. I had at least a year teaching. And during that year was when we began talking about what, I can't remember the first meeting, but we had a women's meeting, and we broke up into small groups, consciousness-raising groups, and met at different times in different places. Out of that, some of us decided really what we needed to do was to have a conference and see what women in the Upper Peninsula really wanted. What was it that we really needed? Mary Soper, who had come from downstate, had invited us to come to her house and go to a conference at, I think it was Oakland College, which had a women's center there. So we did that, and it was very impressive. And so when we came back, we convinced Northern to put on a conference for us. And we had a conference called, I think it was called The Changing Role of Women.
And so it was initiated by the women versus Northern.
Oh, yeah,
suggests-
no,
okay.
it was absolutely initiated by the women. I don't think Northern would have thought about it. Not at all. No, the women were the ones. And out of that conference came this real, well, I should say, I'm going to say demand, whether it's really a demand, but a real interest in having a women's center at Northern. And so we petitioned, we worked hard to institute one, and after a lot of meetings and begging and so on, they agreed to have one. Well, Gail Griffiths was appointed the first director. She was interim because she was faculty at the time, and she knew she couldn't put in a whole lot of time to it. And then after Gail, I was appointed. And Judy, was it June? Judy Russell, no, June. I guess it was June.
Judy Russell, I understand, was the first counselor.
Yeah, okay. Judy
And then
was,
June,
then June
followed her, yeah.
So Judy and I moved we had this little office in the old main building. Is that what it was called? In that old building that was torn down. And I can remember we bought some red burlap and put up curtains in the windows. Anyway, we started the Women's Center, and we got lots of ideas, things that people wanted. Women wanted courses in finance, they wanted courses in, they're just a myriad of things.
So the goal there was to offer educational program under the roof, not necessarily for credit, but
Right.
yeah.
Well, their goal was really to help women fulfill their potential, whatever it may be. And so, in doing that, we started a whole lot of different kinds of activities. One was workshops, and we had a number of workshops, which were run by volunteers, but the volunteers were all trained. And we worked closely with the counseling center. And we also decided that we needed to do a lot of public education. The public really didn't know what this was all about, had a bad idea of what women's liberation was. And so we had a speakers bureau. We went all across the UP talking to groups. A lot of them were men's groups. At that time, groups like the Lions Club and Kiwanis and all of those were strictly male. They were not female. And so we went and educated them.
what kind of a reception?
We had I think we had a fairly good reception.
At least courtesy.
I'm sure, well, they were polite. I just don't know what they were thinking behind their backs, but they were not rude to us anyway. I mean, that was a time when women, they couldn't get credit in their own name. You couldn't get a loan. You couldn't even get a library card in your own name. You had to have your husband or your mother or your father. So there was just a lot to do. And women knew very little about their own health. And we worked with Northern's health department to help educate women about their own bodies. I don't know if you remember the book, Our Bodies, Ourselves. that was the basis for something. And the other thing, one of the other workshops, which was pretty popular, was a workshop which we called assertiveness training. And assertiveness training was really to help women be able to say no when they really meant no, and not always to say yes. And I don't mean just in sexual things, I mean in whatever it was they wanted to do, that they ought to be able to stand up for themselves.
I recall that as a buzzword, and it was contrasted to being aggressive.
Right, absolutely.
That if some fine points, but some very important things for working your way into a
exactly.
Executive
I'll tell you a
position.
funny story about that. When I was I ran for the Common Council, and I won a seat on the commission. And after a year or two, really would have been my turn to be mayor, but there'd never been a woman on the city commission, and the men looked askance at that. And there were only 7 of us, I think, on the commission. So when it came time to vote for the mayor, which was voted on by the commissioners themselves, there were 3 people who were running for mayor. And I was one of them. And the vote after vote after vote. And finally, I thought to myself, this is really ridiculous. I don't care that much about it. And then I thought, Holly, you're teaching assertiveness training. Don't you dare step down. So I didn't. And they had to run out and get some more ballots because they had run out of ballots. All this was on TV at the time. It was really, really crazy. So finally, after I think 36 ballots, one of the gentlemen backed down. And so I was elected. And so I said, gentlemen, thank you for your overwhelming support. But anyway, we all got along pretty well, and it was an interesting
And you were a
experience.
first.
Yeah.
And then one of the other founding mothers became the first chair, I think, of the county commission,
Yeah.
Sally Mae. So this was an
Yeah.
era of really...
Well, it was. That was the first time women got elected to a lot of those positions. And it was a breakthrough. This was in 72. And that was a breakthrough year for us.
Were you on the council parallel to your serving as the director
Yes,
of the
I
Women's
was.
Center?
Uh-huh.
Pretty heavy agenda then.
It was. Well, as director of the Women's Center, I was part-time. Our budget never exceeded $18,000, and that included the counselor and myself. But of course, it's part-time, but it was full-time. And we did get a lot of other grants for various things. We got a grant on displaced homemakers, which Francis Vandermill ran that for a while. And then we had a grant for women in non-traditional roles, where we went out, women who were in non-traditional positions, like maybe a telephone line person, or a miner, or an executive, would go out into the schools and they would talk about their jobs and what it meant and how women could break through. And that was a funded position.
And that must have been a little difficult to find those women in those times.
It was.
I mean,
was.
those
It
would
was
be
hard.
atypical.
Right.
Yeah.
It was atypical. And hopefully they inspired some younger women to look at those things. Because at that time, women were mostly either secretaries, teachers, nurses, and that was really about the extent of their roles at the time. So it was a big thing. We did a lot of counseling. We did a lot of what else? Oh, we also began at that time. Pat Micklow and her cohort at Ann Arbor had written a very good paper on spousal abuse. and it had become quite well known. And we began a program then whereby we had a hotline that people could call if they wanted. We didn't have a shelter as they have now, but we would answer the calls, and these women would come and stay in our homes. And we were looking for a shelter, but we had to have funding for it. So while I was there, we did not have a shelter. But we did answer the calls, and we did some really stupid things. I can remember one time I answered a call, and I went to somebody's house. You know, you should never, ever do that.
In the
And I
midst
got
of
there before
in
the
the
police
midst of a
did, and the guy had
situation.
a gun. Yeah. So it was not a smart thing to do. But we learned the hard way. But nobody got shot. Another thing we started was a halfway house for women. We had a grant for that from the Episcopal Church, and it was called the Joan Curto House. And
Was part of your particular job to go for grants, or how did the grant
I
process?
don't know.
No,
It just happened.
things happen.
The idea was that we started these things that the women needed and then spun them off on their own. So the spouse abuse project, this shelter, became its own thing, and so did the halfway house. I don't know whatever happened to the halfway house.
It evolved and continued. Now there's Great Lakes Recovery, which is an umbrella over a lot of these.
Well, there were a lot of. This was just a halfway house for women.
Women, yeah, but I think it's all. I don't know
okay.
the detail either, but
Well,
there's still that kind of.
So we really started a lot of various things. And then at some point, we had moved into the new administration building by then. But at some point in all of this, funds were cut for Northern. And they decided that they had to cut out some of their continuing education functions. So they appointed a blue ribbon committee, which was to come up with recommendations. And because continuing education at that time included a lot. That included conferences, it included public television and radio, and included, what else? I don't know, a whole lot of different functions. Excuse me. So, their recommendations were, first of all, don't lose public radio. Second of all, don't lose the Women's Center. Then so on down the list. Well, at that point, we had, unfortunately, some of the women who were married to top-ranking men at the university had become very interested in the total woman concept, if you can remember what that was. They were very much against what we were doing. They had become quite interested in fundamentalism and so on. They did not at all like what we were doing. So anyway, I blame it. I mean, that may not be the whole thing, but so the first thing to go out of continuing education was the Women's Center.
Despite the recommendation.
Yeah,
Oh, that's interesting.
And it wasn't costing them that much money.
Mm-mm.
Actually, one of the things that we did in the Women's Center was to raise money for scholarships for women to returning to the university.
Sort of win-win for the
Yeah,
university.
yeah. We didn't. But anyway, so that was the end of the Women's Center for Continuing Education. What we did do at the time, Bill had decided that it was time for him to move on, and we were going to move to Cortland, New York. And but before that happened, got the okay to use the basement of the St. Paul's Episcopal Church for a temporary place for the Women's Center to meet. And I think that's when Sally became the
Director.
The director. So that kind of was the end of my involvement. I kept in touch with them, some of the women who were in our consciousness raising group, and Carlin and Pat and Marianne Kublin and Lillian Hildreth, Sarah McClellan, Carolyn McDonald, and I bought a timeshare. And so once a year we go someplace, hopefully warm, and have a great time together.
Still?
Yeah.
Still? Oh,
yeah.
that's wonderful.
But I think this year we'll probably go out and see Sarah, who's been ill. So we may do that this year. Yeah. But it's been a great way to keep tabs.
Did you carry your interest in this kind of project with you when you moved, or did you switch gears in
No,
your new
I
location?
absolutely did. And when I moved to Cortland, I became, not right away, but after a couple of years, I became the executive director of the YWCA. So we were doing a lot of the same kinds of things, yeah.
You could draw on that. Could we go back a little
Sure.
now to the specifics of the governance? When you were under Northern, how did you decide what programs, how was the decision making for things that you would do? Was that the executive director's decision? Was that
No, we had a
Northern
board.
people? You had a board.
We had
Okay.
a board, yeah.
And did Northern have control over that board, or were you pretty much on your own?
We were pretty much on
Your
our
own.
I mean, they could have kicked us out at any time.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one person who was really helpful was Jack Rambouts. I don't know.
Yes.
Remember him? He was vice president at the time. And also Don Jackson was helpful. I don't know that, well, I don't know. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, yeah. So there was support, and basically they were giving you a roof over your head, and a bit
Supportive
for
services.
support.
I mean,
Yeah,
sure, we had the use of the
facilities and
facilities and the furniture and the materials.
and then you would interconnect if you're going to plan some sort of a meeting that might involve. Did faculty ever get involved in any of the programs, or?
Well, they did in the sense that some of them really gave us help in leading our programs. The counseling department was very, very helpful, and we had small group counseling sessions. And the health, I can remember Barb, I can't remember, but she's doing a workshop. And I remember Gina Grunstrom. We wanted to start a children's center, and Gina Grunstrom was very helpful in that. And of course, Gail was always very helpful. There were women on the board who were faculty members. So.
And I remember one of the people we've talked to saying, while they were sad to leave Northern because that had been a supportive environment, they also realized that if you got out into the community, you would be attracting women who might not feel they belonged in an academic setting.
I think that's true.
So there was some
I think there was
upside to
something
it.
that was a little off-putting about Northern for some women who felt that somehow they couldn't
They didn't
be
have a degree, or
with a college campus. But yeah, I think that was true, and I think it was probably good that it got out in the community. However, I guess I won't say that. I was taken aback when I heard they were raising their money by bingo. I just thought, that's a stupid way to raise money.
Other people have commented on that. That was hard to take. It was one of those like born of necessity because we don't want to die, but that shouldn't be the way.
Exactly, and I understand that. Stood them in good stead for a long time.
Absolutely.
So I guess
Got them over
But
it.
I always had the feeling of gambling. It's taking advantage of the least of our people. Wow.
Right. The other issue that I did hear about was when no smoking in places like bingo parlors became an issue because many people realized if there's no smoking, we lose a lot of participants. Therefore, we lose money.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
So, do we support this or don't we? And of course, most of the folks would not feel smoking was a good idea, but gee, so it was balanced off.
Money.
Yeah. you're faced with political
That's
realities
right,
in these
right.
situations.
Anything you do, the
Yeah,
political reality,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So you probably left right about the time then they left Northern, so you're not as aware of how they govern. Did governing the Women's Center or decision making change much
No, I don't
when
think
they
so. I
just
think it was a
continue with the
board,
board?
pretty much. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
a board.
Now you've returned to Marquette, and we're delighted for that. I think as an observer, I'm so impressed with women who were in the original group coming back and wanting to be involved during a challenging time for the Women's Center. What drew you back in? Your pals or the concepts?
Well, I actually never really got lost interest in the Women's Center. And yeah, my good friends, Pat and Carolyn and other people, Sally Mae, you know, it was good to be working with them again too. And yeah, there are a lot of challenges, just a lot of challenges. But I've been amazed at how well this group of women is doing. I think we need to add more women to the board. But I'm astounded at how much money they've been able to raise and how well things seem to be going. Um, so I'd like to see us, I'd like to see the center expand its role. Pretty much now it is focused on women who are, women and their children who are in abusive situations. And they house them, give them counseling, shelter, food, whatever. They also do rape crisis counseling and some other things. I'd like to see our role expanded, not the same way that we had it 30 years ago or 40 years ago, because I think times have changed a lot. But I think there are things the Women's Center could be doing that aren't being done in the community. However, I've just been amazed at the changes in Marquette. It's just amazing. Of course, I came back summers, almost every summer.
You have a
It's,
daughter still in the community, do
well,
you know?
yeah, she wasn't always there, but even before she moved back here, we came back every summer. We rented a place um, on the 128, and then we used to have family reunions at the uh, Episcopal camp on Little Lake. And now we have family reunions at the Fort Bungalow down in Pequaming. So, yeah, my family grew up here. My kids all grew up here. They consider this home. They don't consider Cortland home. They were all gone by that time. So yeah.
Well, we're
it's a place
lucky
to
that
come
you've
back to.
maintained that. But
Well,
now go a little further with what you'd like to see. You said not quite like before, but do you have particular programs in mind or just exploring
no, I
them?
don't. I think you have to find out what people want. But I think there are needs that aren't being met. But I've kind of segued into that, into saying how much Marquette has changed. And I think a lot of the things that we saw, the needs that we saw, have been met or are being met by other agencies or organizations. So I think we need to look very hard and see what it is that we should be doing. I think at the heart of it, we must continue being advocates for women who are in violent situations, and men too, actually. Um, I don't think we'll ever come to the point where we're going to house men, but I think we can do something by working with social services and the police to
And support counseling
right,
and guidance.
absolutely, yeah. But I see that there is a future here for it, and I like the feeling, I like the spirit of the women who are involved, and I boggles my mind to see the dedication of the staff that is working with these women. I mean, there's so many needs, and it's so hard, and things have changed a great deal. Today we were at a meeting, and we were talking about how their clients have changed so much that now they see so many women coming who have lost their children. I mean, the Department of Social Services has taken their children away from them, and they maybe have drug use or and don't have any money whatsoever. It's very sad. So there are just so many things to fight, but there's such a need to coordinate services, and I think they do a wonderful job in coordinating.
That I've heard reinforced, that to coordinate. And your description of spinning off, it's like you're a brain trust
Yeah.
that gets ideas, makes them possible,
Yeah.
and then sees that there are other.
Yeah.
And
Well, it turns out, as a matter of fact, even though Harbor House and the whole program had been spun off, they just couldn't make it, so they petitioned the Women's Center to come back in. So the Women's Center did take it over, and it's become a major project for them.
Well, it's exciting, and I think, again, the fact that women who were in the beginning still recognize the needs and are willing to devote time speaks to the value, and it also speaks to the community about the need to stick with it.
That's
They've
right.
seen it.
That's
And
right.
I think it was Carla and maybe Sally too who commented, this community has supported in so many ways, from the unions helping with remodeling to individuals committing significant time and money, as Marquette seems to do with everything that's valuable.
I know, it's wonderful. It
It's
really
wonderful.
is. But Jane, it would be like having a baby and then not supporting that baby. So if you have a baby, then you're going to love and support that baby for the rest of your
Forever.
life. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what the Women's Center
Has
means
meant.
to the founding mothers.
Excellent. And that's where the title. Anything that we haven't touched on, or a personal experience that kind of highlights for you the Women's Center?
Trying to think. One of the exciting things that happened to me while I was at the Women's Center was I attended two really exciting conferences. Well, a lot of them, but the two exciting. I went to Mexico City to attend the International Women's Year, and Bob and Sarah McClellan and my husband Bill and I, the four of us, went to this conference. It was so exciting to see women from all over the world, and they were just all so excited about what the possibilities were. And now you see these terrible things that are still happening, especially in Africa and Asia, as to how women are being treated and raped, and it's just trafficked. Just unbelievable. Of course, it happens in this country, too. And then the other exciting thing was when the United States had their conference for women, and that was in '77, I believe. And there were women from all over the United States, from every state. And that was exciting. And it was fun, too, because my sister was there from Iowa at the time, so that was, yeah. And that was an exciting time. There were lots of just really exciting times and lots of wonderful people that we worked with, and it was a really good time in my life. Yeah.
You feel you've reached a potential there that you, way back in the early days, were wondering, what am I supposed to be doing with my time, right?
Well, I don't know, Jane. I was trying to think now about what if I had to relive my life, what would I do that I would do differently? Maybe it's just because the inauguration just was on or what, but I think I would love to be an historian that could make history come alive. I think you're doing this with this project, and I think that's wonderful.
Well,
But
I hope so, because it's so much fun
Yeah.
with you folks to look back on
you
it.
know, one of the people I just really admire is Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Yes,
I just
it's
think
her
she's-
comments.
Oh, I
Yeah.
just love her. Yeah, she's just great. Well, it's hard sometimes to make history interesting, but she does, and she writes so well, and it's just
Right.
fascinating. So.
As a retired history teacher myself, although I ended up teaching some other subjects, I think of just the media now. I don't know if you watched The Abolitionists last night
Yeah,
on
I
public
didn't
TV.
last night,
To
but
have had those tools,
Yeah.
because the visuals really
Yeah,
do
yeah.
help a lot. But well, we can wrap this up
Okay.
and chat on. But this has been wonderful,
Well,
and
thank you. And
I
thank you
think
for
our
the tea.
community is grateful to all you gals, ladies, and the
Well.
men who supported you for the contribution it's made to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.